Welcome to the Seven Figure Builder Show. My name is Julie Baranek, founder of Seven Figure Builder, where we help high-achieving CEOs work smarter, not harder, with gorgeous insights to scale to seven figures and beyond. And I'm here today with my friend Sophie Bee, and I am ecstatic to have you on the show today.
Excited. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So first and foremost, where in the world are you?
I'm in Canada. I'm in Ottawa. So it's very cold in the winter and very warm in the summer.
I'm sure. It's beautiful up there.
Yeah, it is.
So for people that haven't had the pleasure to meet you yet, can you tell us just a little bit about what you do with your business?
Yeah, so I am an attraction marketing coach and launch strategist. So I help my clients to, attract clients, but in the social media realm. So everything from, growing audiences to monetizing them and everything in between, essentially. It's not how I started. I started sort of morphed, if you will. I started in life coaching about 3.5, 4 years ago. And I just found that clients were coming into my programs, I was filling them up, and they were coming in saying, how are you doing this? I was attracting a lot of coaches asking questions and basically funnel hacking. So I said, well, don't hack my funnels. I'll just build a course for you. Right. And so ended up here, and the rest is history.
Awesome. And I would say, we'll just dig right in, but most people hate sales, right? Like that's like the bane of their existence. They love what they do, but they really struggle with closing sales and attracting clients and getting leads. So you've got, such an important part of the entire business, no matter what business you're in. But where do you tell people to start? So like they're struggling, where do they begin?
With a passion, right? With a fire, something that you can get out of bed and talk about forever, really. Talking about sales, it's really interesting because I don't consider myself a salesperson at all, even though my programs are all around sales and selling online. But it's interesting because I despised sales when I started, despised it. And I actually years ago, I ran a cake company. So totally different. And I sold without selling. I was so against selling that I ended up with this company that sold itself, right? I started just sharing online and attracting clients, and it happened. And when I came into coaching, I was like, there's no way I'm doing this. And I remember being in coaching school, actually, and they said, you have to have X number of practice clients, and you got to sit there and you got to sell to them, and here's your script. And I was like, no, do you think I can get through this without doing that part? Do you think I can graduate without the sales part? And I was just so against it because it just felt so gross and icky and pushy. I was like, I don't want to sell to people. So I did everything to find a different way. So I was like, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to find another way. There's got to be a way to sell without selling. And that's what I did. I found a way to sell without selling. I mean, do I sell? Absolutely, all the time. It's a skill you have to learn in business, but I don't do it in a way that feels like it's selling. And I think that's important, is to, when you're starting, is to get good at the skill, right? I mean, learn the basics of what selling is, but find a way that works for you. Right. It's I've got to a point now where I don't do a lot of sales calls. I'll have the odd connection call, but the intent of them is not to sell. It's to connect with an audience. And, most people buy now. I like to say I have buying conversations, not selling conversations. So I think it's really about, learning the foundational skills, but figuring out along the way, right? How do you want to sell, right? There's not just one way. So does that kind of answer your question?
No, it does. It does. And I think that's critical. Like you hit on a key there of they're buying conversations, not selling conversations. I love that because, again, so many of us, we hate that feeling of I'm pushing something on somebody that doesn't want or need what we have necessarily. So how do you do it different without spilling all the goods of your entire program? How do you suggest for people to do that differently?
Yeah. So I think there's this whole world of online sales, right? I mean, there's so many sales programs, and typically, especially in the coaching space, it's been dominated by what we tend to call bro marketers, right? The guys that show up and they're like, you got to get on sales calls and you got to convince people and overcome their objections. And I look at it differently. I mean, I know rather that you do have to overcome objections at some point, but it's where and how you do it that makes the difference. So I don't get on calls with complete strangers and then just sit there and ask them really painful questions that, they leave feeling like, oh gosh, if I don't give her my credit card, that's it, right? That's not what I do at all. When I say buying conversations, if somebody does jump on a call with me, or if somebody, does jump into my DMs, they're asking me questions at this point to try and figure out if, what my programs are and if they're a right fit. And I'm asking them questions to figure out if they're a right fit too, right? Can I actually help this person? But in order to get to that stage, I create content, right? So it's all about helping people shift to become the person they need to become to get the results in my program. But I do that through my content. So I address all the objections up front, right? It's like basically what I did was learned through the process of the sales call, right? The typical thing that they teach you, and then broke that apart into content. So it's like, how can I have this conversation more publicly, right? How can I have a public conversation so people can, make decisions before they even come, into my world? Because I think it's just a really bad experience for people, right? Generally, people have this fear of jumping on a sales call, and I didn't want that to be a block, right? I didn't want people to feel that I don't want to jump on a call with her because she's going to sell to me, when I genuinely was like, no, I actually want to help you. So I changed the conversation, essentially.
I love it. So it's really a focus on helping, not selling, seeing where and how you can help the person rather than pushing a product down their throat.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, selling, I think the whole idea of selling is service, which you probably heard. I could not get my head around that for the longest time. It just didn't make sense. I was like, that's just some, absolute BS, right? That someone
Right.
needed to sell more stuff
To buy their program.
Right, exactly. And it's the whole thing too, when people are like, you got to invest in yourself to get where you want to go. I was like, well, it's not a sales thing. I just couldn't get around it. But I honestly believe now selling can be service. It's not about, pushing someone to a sale. It's not about getting, pushing people over a hump to buy your stuff. It's about determining if you're the person that can deliver the message that's actually going to help them move forward. And so really selling is about questions, right? It's not about pushing someone to make a decision. It's about asking the right questions so someone can determine if you're somebody that can actually help them. And I like to think of it this way too. It's like, selling is part of the entire process of a program. It's the beginning of a relationship. So I think too often people are going, oh gosh, I got to go over the sales hump and I'm going to sell to someone. And then, it's like, that's it, right? They pay and they're done. It's like, no, this is the beginning of your relationship. So when someone's coming and it's like with these narcissistic sales tactics, so to speak, it's like, what does the rest of that relationship look like? Are you just going to change the delivery of your program and then it's misaligned? Or is somebody going to experience something equally as sort of scary inside? So I like to look at that whole process and say how you're going to meet me from the very first meeting in my content, and in that process of buying is going to be consistent all the way through. And that's sort of that, I look at it this way too. It's like oftentimes there's this missing trust, right? When someone comes in, it's like, I feel like I have to force you to buy something, and I don't trust that you can afford it, and all of these things come up. Like, if you can't trust your prospects or people to make a buying decision, how are you going to trust them to get results in your program?
Absolutely.
There's a lot there.
Yeah. And that's where you start to build that trust, is from those initial conversations, right? That they build that relationship with you, and then they want to work with you and continue to get results from you.
Yeah, for sure.
So with your content, do you use a specific kind of framework? Like, there's so many different ways to do your content out there, but what have you found resonates the most with people?
So I write what I like to call like value-based storytelling content. And the content really, it's about bringing in value through the story. So I tell transformational stories, right? It's about, I kind of bring in the psychology of sales here, but
Okay.
you drive someone to take an inspired action, essentially. So I actually did a thing on this morning, but typically in the content realm, you see one of two things that doesn't typically work. And I know this firsthand. I grew an audience of about 30,000 people very, very quickly. And I drove 10 million leads, just let them fly away. And I made all of one sale out of those 10 million leads. And I couldn't really understand why. I was like, why aren't they buying? And it was because I was really good at telling stories. I was really good at allowing people to feel into the emotions. I was really good at emoting those things. And people were like, they were loving it. They were liking it. They were commenting. I was getting all the engagement, but it wasn't selling. It wasn't converting to sales. And so, being frustrated at the lack of sales, I'm like, well, I've got this audience, what's happening? I flipped my content and made my second mistake. And that was to create the how-to content. And I started to create this content that basically was like, here's a to-do list of all the things you have to do to get the result you want. And it was completely emotionless. And so at that point, I was like, okay, and that's when I actually did go and invest a lot in learning to actually create sales content and to, storytell and have this value-based storytelling. And essentially it was the combination of it, right? It was about saying, okay, this is the story, but I'm going to show you the process of how you get to A to B, from A to B, to show you that I have a method that works, right? So it's really about driving people to see and to feel and to actually believe that that's possible for them as well. So it's about, showing them the island, and it's showing rather than telling. And a lot of the time, the mistake that people make in their content is simply selling the boat, right? So it's like, I like to explain it. It's like if people are on island A, right? And typically we're taught pain point marketing. So talk to the pain of someone over here. I don't do that. I talk to the island of B. It's like I'm selling the island, saying, this is fun over here. And this is the place, all the exciting things, all the things you want are, right? But I'm not selling them a ticket to the boat. I'm not saying, here, come on my boat, and I'm just going to sell you my method. It's like, no, that's just the vehicle to get you to where you want to go. And so it's this idea of showing people that, you get where they're at, right? You're talking to them on that island, but you're also showing them on the other islands where they want to be, and that you have a method for them to get there. So does that kind of make sense to you?
It does. And it's essentially selling the vision, right? It's helping them understand, feel, and process what that vision is, and see that gap from where they are today to what it is that you offer. And then they naturally want what you have, which is the vehicle to get them to that ultimate vision of whatever you're trying to provide for them, right?
Exactly. It's exactly what it is. It's establishing the gap, right? You're establishing that there is in fact a gap, which is and exactly the vision, right? It's about selling the vision rather than the method. So yeah, there's so many ways to sell. There's so many ways to do different content. I think the most important thing about content is really figuring out what your voice is in that content. Right? Like if you're consistent with it and you show up in your voice in that content, it's going to sell. One of the biggest problems though is people just copying other people's content, right? It's like, or I'm just going to take from here, I'll take from there, and I'll put it out on, oh, this didn't work, so I'll try something else, or that didn't work, so I won't show up for 3 months. Right. So, or strategy hopping as well. I mean, that was a really big turning point for me. I was hunting for a lot of strategies, and I kept buying more and more and more strategies because I wanted the next biggest and best strategy. And it was like, the turning point was when I unsubscribed. So I'm not doing this anymore. I don't need any more strategies. I need my strategy. I needed to show up, and I needed to just be, right? It wasn't about the things I was doing. It was about who I was being when I was actually doing those things. And that was a huge game changer. Like that's when the revenue jumped.
Yeah, no, I love it. And actually, so can we take a step back for people that are listening? So where are you putting out that content? Because I think this is a big miss for a lot of people. Like, where are you on Facebook, for example, or which profile are you using? You know what I mean?
So, and I think you're right. There's so much noise out there. If you should be on every single platform, and I would never recommend to any of my clients that they start on every platform. I would say to my clients, like, start one place, and start the place, not where you think your clients but where you want to be, right? What do you like to create? If you love video content and never want to write anything, well, then go to TikTok. Right? If you want to kind of have a little bit of both, then maybe Instagram's better for you. If you want to write more content, then well, maybe Facebook, right? Like pick the platform based on where you want to be and start there. So when I started my life coaching, I started on TikTok. When I morphed over into attraction marketing, I went back to Facebook. And I started on my profile, and then I opened a Facebook group, and then I used other people's Facebook groups to basically borrow audiences and attract people into my group. My group was monetized within the first 3 weeks, and there was about 400 people in it within the first couple of weeks. And then I grew that group to about 2,000 in just under 4 months and monetized it pretty quickly. But, I like to say it doesn't really matter where you are, and it doesn't matter how big of a following you have either. It matters that if it monetizes at 100 people, it will monetize at 10,000. If it doesn't monetize at 100, it won't monetize at 10,000. So really, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter where you are. It's really where you want to be.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it depends on, like you mentioned, what type of content you want to create, what your personality is, what are you good at, and using your strengths to find a platform that actually matches that, quite frankly, right? You don't want to be dancing on video every day if you hate video and hate being online. And you don't want to be writing huge long blog posts if you hate writing. So like you need to really look inside and see what is it that works for you.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And I think as well, people tend to try to do too much, not just across platforms, but on the same platform. And it's like, okay, well, I got to do all the things, right? I have a Facebook group, therefore I have to do reels and I have to go live and I have to, show up in my content and I have to do this and I have to show up 15 times a day or whatever the, latest thing is, or I have to, download this content calendar and post this on a Monday. And that's just a load of garbage. What does consistency look like for you, right? What feels good to you and what can you consistently show up in? When I first started out, I wasn't doing lives in my group. I was at that stage, I was like, oh, I don't know about this. I don't want to be that visible. So I started posting content. And then I started, gradually building up. I mean, now, sure, I'm on multiple platforms, but I also have, a team that's helping me. So I'm not doing it alone. And I think the important thing is as well, is people build things backwards. Right? People build these businesses backwards and they do the ads and the branding and do all of these things, but they don't take the time to figure out what their audiences want and how to really convert their content to begin with. And so they scrap it, like, it doesn't work. I need to try something else. I need to do something else. It's like, no, figure out what, why it's not working. Like, understand the strategy underneath of it, not just the actual action of doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's more than just the latest tactic that you throw onto whatever platform that you're on that's going to transform everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you find in your group then that was like pivotal for converting your content into sales?
Treating people like people. Honestly, it wasn't about the content. It wasn't anything to do with the content. It was about listening. It was about connecting with people, and it was about getting to know them, like having real relationships. It was about not talking at my audience, but talking with them, right? Having conversations around, what they wanted. I mean, I don't do any I'm struggling with this, or are you struggling with that? Like, I don't do any pain point stuff, but I, had conversations like, what do you want, right? What do you want from me? What do you want from marketing? What do you want from business? Like, what do you actually, what's going to help you? And I let them lead the way. So, I think when I first started out, I did what a lot of people do, and I built my programs and with the whole build it and they will come idea. And when I built this business, I didn't, and that's why it grew so quickly. It's because I let the people lead, right? I like to say I never created my programs, my clients did. My clients created the programs that they wanted. I just delivered them, right? I brought the knowledge to the table. I looked at it and said, how can I bring my, zone of genius to what it is they're asking for to solve their problems, right? I used to ask them. I put up polls and had real conversations, and that's when I started on my connection calls and said, let's just chat and let me figure out how I can help you. And built relationships, but long-term relationships, not just here, I'm going to sell this to you and that's it. It was, I'm going to sell to you and I'm going to evolve, and I hope that evolve with me. And so far they have. I mean, some of my clients are longer term, not because the first program didn't work, but because they wanted the evolutions of the programs.
Yeah, no, I love that. Absolutely. And it's so key to really connect with whoever your ideal audience is, and then listen to what it is that they're telling you, because that's the key to success for no matter what the program is, no matter what the course, no matter what the product. It's what do your clients want, because they're the ones that are ultimately driving the success of your business.
Yeah, they are. And without them, you don't have a business, right? There's this drives me absolutely crazy, but those Instagram or TikTok reels or videos when they pop up and say, here, you can make $1 million overnight without doing a thing. It's like, here, do you have a phone? You got 15 minutes, you're going to be a billionaire. I was like, really? Is that how that works? Right. Forget to, well, no, you need people, right? You need people, you need to connect with those, actually connect with them. You have that like, no trust thing is still a thing. Right? Yeah. I mean, people I think are more trusting, more so on the internet of buying from a complete stranger. But at the same time, you still have to know how to create the content to be able to connect and build that, like, know and trust enough that somebody will trust a stranger on the internet. But yeah, you got to have the people. Without the people, what do you have?
Exactly. So as you've grown your business, how has systems and incorporating automation saved you time in your business?
At first it didn't. It completely complicated things.
I love it. Yeah.
And I think this again was building it backwards and trying to do it too soon. I tried to automate things before I really knew how to speak to my audience and how to connect with them and what they wanted. And I wasted a lot of time doing it. I say wasted time, and you learn from everything, right? So wasn't really a waste, but it was certainly a lot of time spent. And I had all the emails set up, and it didn't really convert as high as I would have liked. Now it converts much higher. Like I have a pretty high conversion rate inside of my groups now. But again, because I spent the time, right? I spent the time learning how and what they wanted, and how to speak to them in a language that, they would buy from. So now it saves me a ton of time, because I have all of that content, and I have all of that stuff, that back end stuff that has grown over time, to be able to pull that and say, okay, this works, this didn't. Now I can put this into a system. But I think, again, I tried to put the systems in before I was ready for the systems. And I think that's something that comes with the shift and the growth, right? Now I'm up leveling my systems. I have a team working with me, creating extra SOPs, but I had to learn to do that first. I had to learn how I wanted to lead generate. I had to learn how I wanted to cultivate my audience. I had to learn what my sales flow system looked like, in order to be able to hire a team to say, hey, now can you put this in a system for me? Here's my tried and tested methods. This is how it works, and train you guys how to do this in a way that is in alignment with me and my business. So now the automation is starting to save me time, but it didn't at first.
Yeah. No, and that's a huge, huge critical point, is that you need to have an established process that works before you bring in automation and systems. And that's obviously, I geek out in, everything systems and automation. But if you take a process that's broken and you put it in automation, then you're just breaking things faster. You're doing it on scale. So I totally agree. You need to figure out what works first, and then take a look at, okay, how do I speed this up when you're ready?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, it's really interesting too in hindsight, because it's this whole kind of, in the beginning, there's this, right, what do you invest, time or money?
Right.
And, I could have back then, like, okay, that's what I couldn't have done, because of my situation, I certainly couldn't have done back then. But, it's a case of, okay, well, you can invest time to learn, or have somebody else implement your systems and such. But that was a mistake I made sort of early on as well, is hiring someone to put systems in place that I didn't know. Right. I didn't know what my systems were. And so when they put these systems in place, they didn't work, because they weren't my systems. And I had nothing that I was leading them to either. I was trying to put systems in before I was ready to actually scale. So I think we can think that, hey, I'm just going to go out there and create, spend money on all of these things and have this set up. And unless you have some sort of previous experience, or have an idea of how you want this to work and know that it's going to work, you're better off spending the time to figure out what's going to work for you in your business.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And, as you've gone through that journey, have you seen that data has helped position you for success, or it just makes things more complicated?
So I have a love-hate relationship with data.
Most people do.
I know we spoke about this a little bit. I flow very organically. My zone of genius, per se, is in the creative zone. So I am very creative. I can come up with ideas a mile a minute. I can implement them. I can very organic the way I do things. But on the flip side, I also value what data can do. I just personally don't pull it. So I do have someone on my team who does pull that data. And I find it really useful, and it's really interesting. Like, it's definitely something that I didn't need it in the beginning, because my numbers weren't really I was learning, right? I didn't have the data. And interestingly, one of the coaches I work with, she purposely says she won't work with newer businesses because they don't have the data.
Right.
She's like, you need that year or two to actually know what your data is, to what you're looking at, to be able to actually put those things in place. So now I absolutely use it, because I can't scale without it. I need to know my numbers. I need to know who's opening emails. I need to know, what's being read, what's being clicked on. I need to know those things in order to know what's working, what's not, and to grow, because my numbers are bigger, right? My audiences are bigger. So I find them absolutely really, really helpful. But, in the beginning, the only real data that I had was a few, engagement statistics on, Instagram or Facebook or whatever in the beginning. But those were actually more detrimental than anything else, because, and I see this a lot with newer coaches, especially who are, newer on sort of in their growing new audiences, is they rely so heavily on those engagements. Look, I looked up the statistics, I'm not getting the engagement. It's like, so many people lurk. And what are you doing as well, right? work with a couple of, coaches from all over, but work with a couple of intimacy coaches or kind of people who are in areas that are more sensitive. They're just not going to get the engagement that someone, say, who's doing fitness or finances is, because people don't necessarily want to tell you that they're, having problems in their relationship or they've had bad experiences. They're not going to tell you that on the internet. So I think you kind of have to take some of the statistics with a grain of salt in terms of, and know your business and how people do buy. And a lot of this comes from asking as well, right? Having those conversations. I always ask my clients, where they found me and such. And even when I don't, they tell me. It always surprises me whenever I put a link up or something, who buys, right? I'm at the point, there aren't too many surprises because I know my audience really well, but a lot of them, they don't comment, they don't like, there is no statistics on them because they're silent people. And then all of a sudden they pop into your funnel and they've bought something. So I think, to answer the question, they're super helpful when you have the data, but at the same time, you have to know what you're looking at.
I couldn't agree more. And a lot of it is context of what it is that you're looking at, making sure you're looking at the right data points. And like you said, having somebody that can kind of shape that story so you know what the heck it is that you're actually looking at, and also knowing your business. I mean, to your point with these companies, like there could be 16, 17 different touches with each individual person, but they're silent touches. Like you don't know that you're connecting with people. And, it's so critical that when those people come in and they tell you, oh, I've been following you forever, that you're not dismissing the impact that you're having on people, even though it's not showing up at the numbers. So yeah, the numbers definitely help shape it, but it's not the end all be all. You have to look at the whole picture and look at your business holistically and not just a single post engagement. Like, what is that whole story, not just, a spot in time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, that opens a whole other can too, right? It's the emotional piece we put on that, right? It's like it didn't get tons of likes, therefore it didn't make an impact. And I should just, take that down. I mean, I've told this story many times before, but I learned this lesson in a really kind of magical but kind of deep way. I was having a stream on TikTok where all of my posts were going viral, and in the context of 10,000 to 100,000 to 500,000, like they were up, but 10,000 being the lowest at one point. And it was around sort of Christmas time, and I posted something that was completely out of context, was not my regular content, but it was just kind of a heartfelt, you need to talk, reach out type thing. This is like a few years ago. And it got like 7 views on it. I was like, what happened? How did I go from like 10 to 500,000 to like 7 views? And I was going to take it down. I was frustrated, and I was like, oh gosh, I've crashed my algorithm. I've changed and I was going to take it down. And before I did, I had someone reach out and say, hey, I saw this video. I've been following you for months and I want to work with you. And she was actually my first, 4-figure sale. And I was like, oh, hang on a second. This 7 viewed video has converted into, a 4-figure sale. I'm, one of my first clients who, amazing transformation with this woman. It was crazy. But a few months later, something else happened, and some guy sent me the video. He DM'd me the video, and he said, I just want to let you know that this video saved my life. He's like, I was on the bathroom floor that night. And I was like, oh, wow. And at that point, I was like, we just don't know what impact that we make. And, here I was beating myself up over these 7 views. Meanwhile, I, had the privilege of working with this woman from that video. And that was that moment that she jumped in, and then someone else. So it's like, no idea about the other 5. But then it got me thinking, I was like, I've had 10 million views. Like, I have no idea what kind of impact that, if one video of 7 people can have that kind of an impact, what did 10 million do? So I think that changed the game for me in terms of, we just don't know, but also the responsibility that comes with it, and being able to say, even if it's not making sales, it's not about sales, right? Like, I mean, the sales is kind of the side effect, right? So when people sort of, especially newer coaches, say to me, well, how do you, it's all about, I want to hit these 10K months or all these things. It's like, think of the impact, go for the impact, and the money will come from there. And they sort of say, well, these 10K months, but also I want to help everyone for free. Can they afford it? And I was like, if you show up online, you're helping a heck of a lot of people for free. If you create really, strong, potent content that, comes from a really kind of soul heartfelt place, you're going to help people. Like, you can't not.
Absolutely. No, and that's so powerful. And So on that note, like you've accomplished a ton in your business, you've reached a ton of lives and helped transform a ton of lives, but how do you define success? Like, what does that look like for you?
That's a good question. You know, success, I mean, success for me is all about impact. It's, you know, the money's really just a side effect of that, right? I mean, of course, businesses are there to make money and such, but it's, for me, it's about impact. I mean, for me, when my clients or audience members reach out to me and tell me, you know, hey, you know, you changed this about this, or this changed my life, or that changed, you know, how I think about something, or I'm just so grateful for being able to show up, you know, as myself more unapologetically, or feel better about myself, like that to me is success. Right? That's the part that drives me. The part where people turn up and say, you know, I had a client who showed up and said that, you know, she was able to start her business because she was able to overcome imposter syndrome. I was like, that is worth more than someone coming to me and saying, hey, I made my first 5K, right? Like, I mean, it's of course exciting. I mean, success to me as well isn't about my success, it's about my client's success, right? So when my clients, you know, do celebrate those things and celebrate that they've posted their first piece of content, or, you know, they got their first client, or they had their first 10K day, or whatever it is, right? It's like, that to me is success, is seeing them change their lives. So that's what it means to me.
I love it. And as you're growing your team, what have you found makes someone a good leader? Like, what are those leadership skills as you've shifted your role from doing it all yourself to, you know, having a full team?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Letting go. It's been the hardest part. You know, I had this conversation with someone today about, you know, the whole leadership thing, right? And so much of that is about emotional regulation, right? It's about, you know, learning to kind of process and regulate your nervous system and let go of certain things and grow as a leader and be okay being visible. And it's like, you know, that, talking of imposter syndrome, knowing that doesn't go away, right? It's like, you know, here I am feeling like I remember my very first masterclass I did, and it was like, I was going to throw in the towel. This is way back with my life, because like, I'm done, this isn't working. And I put out, I like one last shot. It was like midnight or something crazy. I was like, fine, I'll just do this one more time. Put out a masterclass. I woke up to 300 signups, and I was like, like, how did this happen? And I remember, so I broke it into three, and the first one, there was like 75 people showed up at this thing. And I remember sitting there being like, who the hell am I to be like
Right?
leading these people? And I just felt like that imposter syndrome was like, oh my gosh. And then, you know, did it again and again. Eventually you're like, okay, I've thought, you know, I attracted this, it's meant to be, whatever, this is where I'm at. And, you know, as I started to scale, I found myself kind of wanting to hide, because I was like, oh gosh, I feel like an imposter again. And then I kind of got comfortable in that role. I was like, okay, time to like move on to a team. And I was like, who am I to be leading a team? So it was that same feeling coming up. And I think, you know, being okay and learning to be visible and work through those emotions so you're not taking it out on a team has been like, that's where the work's happen, right? It's that inner stuff where, you know, I worked through when, you know, the whole sales, going back to the sales for a minute, I mean, that really was what enabled me to learn to sell, was learning to work with my own emotions and feelings about it, right? And those deep core beliefs like, oh gosh, am I going to get rejected, all that kind of stuff. And that has, guess what, shown up in team leading. So I think that's where the leadership part has come. For me, it's been about the internal thing, right? The emotion, being able to kind of regulate my nervous system. And I'm still kind of learning to do this. I'm at this kind of, and I actually had this conversation with one of my coaches today. I'm sort of at this stage where I'm learning to let go of the chaos. So for a long time, I've lived in a very chaotic time, right? And I haven't been okay with that calm in between, because it felt boring. I was like, this feels boring. I don't know how to regulate myself here. And so I was chasing those ups and downs, and I was on this crazy roller coaster, and I wasn't okay in those moments in between, right? So now it's getting to that phase of being like, okay, you're okay. You're not going to die. You don't have to chase this chaos anymore. You can rely on a team. You can have that support. You know, you can start to make things easier for you so that you can, you know, move into, you know, doing more of the flow stuff and living the next level of life, whatever that looks like. But that's my challenge right now, is what I'm going through, is learning to calm that chaos and stop chasing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. But it brings to mind, like, so much of what we do and deal with in our day to day is from our subconscious, right? Like, only about, I think, 5% of what we actually process is conscious, and everything else is subconscious. And when we have those underlying struggles, so often it's that same thing coming up over and over and over again, that you might overcome it in this one instance, but then it shows up again and shows up again. And, you know, it's critical to be able to deal with whatever that struggle is, like on a root level, and frankly, be able to talk to somebody and talk it through, and, you know, to be able to be successful professionally and be able to overcome that and not have to deal with it over and over and over again.
Yeah, bringing the awareness to it. That was the most surprising thing, was it was the personal journey that entrepreneurship brings. It's like all of a sudden you're going through this, like all of these traumas are coming up, and all of these, you know, things that, you know, you think, oh, I can just compartmentalize that, and, you know, my relationship problem over here isn't going to bleed into my business over here. I'm like, oh, what a bet.
Surprise.
Really surprised. But then you also start to realize, well, hang on a second, if I deal with that, then that's going to tap into, you know, a bigger, higher revenue or a different revenue stream. And so it becomes this kind of game where you're sort of playing in all these areas of your life. And it's like, ooh, if I improve this, then what about that? So challenges really do become opportunities. So you start seeing all these things in different ways and saying, well, if I, you know, learn to be more present with my kids, then I can be more present with my clients. If I learn to be, you know, help my client over here, then maybe this translates to helping my kid over there. And you start kind of pulling from all these places, and then everything gets better.
Absolutely. No, they all work together. You're absolutely right. Looking at the year ahead, what is the most life-changing goal that you have in this coming year?
You know, it's interesting, because I've sort of changed the way I think about this a little bit. And the answer to the question is I don't know. And that's the exciting part. You know, I used to be I mean, I have goals, obviously, like, you know, I have like all my statistical goals and all things, but I've sort of let, you know, being someone who is so sort of organically free flowing in the creative, I don't know what I'm going to create, which is going to be that next big thing. And that's the part that excites me. That is the big thing, is that I don't know. So I know that it's going to be an evolution, and I know that it's going to be kind of, you know, I've got programs in the works and such that I'm kind of morphing and molding. But one of the mistakes that I personally made that actually stunted the growth of my business was planning out every detail of what every program looked like. Because as someone who is incredibly creative, I felt trapped by it, and then nothing happened, and it didn't get creative, because by the time it came to create, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, because that's or that doesn't feel exciting anymore. So, you know, I think the exciting thing for me is that I've worked for a while to kind of get my group program at this evergreen stage, and that's, you know, at the stage now where it's sort of starting to become more evergreen, which is really exciting. But it also has freed up so much space to do the next big exciting thing, whatever that thing looks like. I don't know. But it's in the most woo-woo sense of the way, right, which I know is completely against every statistic that you read. But it's a feeling. It's like leaning into the feeling and knowing that, like, it's big, and it's bigger than I know what it is, and allowing it to be bigger than, you know, I can even dream up. Because I think part of the work has also been allowing my logical brain not to lead the way, right, but to kind of allow for that expansion, to say, okay, well, you know, is there room to play inside of my mind that is bigger than what I can envision or write down on paper?
That's awesome. Well, and it also goes back to what you said before of letting your clients lead the way. So it's also listening to, okay, they're here. What do they need to get to that next level? And then building whatever the heck that is that you're gifted in.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I show up unapologetically in my audiences, and I teach my clients, you know, teach them, but I lead the way in that respect. And so the nice thing is when they show up unapologetically, they are very vocal about what they need and want.
That's fabulous, because that's what you want, is people that are passionate about you and very vocal about it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, unafraid.
So for people that want to come check out what you're doing and join your amazing programs, where can they find you online?
So the best place to find me would be in my Facebook group. So it's Magnetic Marketing I can give you the link, but
yeah, we'll have all the links below. Yeah. But go ahead.
So Magnetic Marketing for Entrepreneurs Who Have a Story to Sell is my Facebook group, or Sophie Bee Magnetic. So Sophie_B Magnetic. I'm sorry, Sophie_B Magnetic. I'm not used to saying the underscore. Instagram would be the best, probably two places to find me.
Okay, fabulous. And we will have all of those links below. And I have one more question, that if you had the attention of the whole world for 5 minutes, what would you tell them?
Be yourself. That's all.
That's it. Drop the mic.
That's simple.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Sophie, for being on. This was a lot of fun. And if you found value in this episode, please do share it. That's how people find us. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And you can find me at sevenfigurebuilder.com.